First this evening, members of a Bristol-based paedophile gang who targeted young schoolboys and turned them into drug addicts and male prostitutes are tonight starting heavy jail sentences. Bristol Crown Court heard how the men picked up boys from the city centre before luring them to a house on the outskirts of the city.
Members of the Avon and Somerset Child Protection Squad raid number 49 Churchill Road in Brislington. Operation Panorama was launched after the police gathered appalling evidence of boys being attacked and raped at the house. Aged between 14 and 17, they were lured there after being picked up, sometimes from these toilets in Anchor Road in Bristol, opposite a bus stop where school coaches collected and dropped off pupils.
These are particularly vile offences that have been investigated over a 2-year period. The perpetrators of these crimes are very, very serious offenders. I do hope they won't be able to offend for a long time.
Christopher Leake, the mastermind behind the gang, pleaded guilty to 6 charges of indecent assault, supplying heroin and living off male prostitution. He was jailed for 13 years. Alan Tanner was convicted of a series of assaults and supplying cannabis. He was sent to prison for 9 years. Peter Clark from Southmead received 3 years for 5 attacks on young boys. A 4th man who can't be named for legal reasons was jailed for 8 years. Sentencing the paedophiles, the Recorder of Bristol, His Honour Mark Judge Dyer, told them this was a lamentable tale. You were persons of power and influence. Young men were forced to commit sexual acts for payments, once hooked on drugs. One boy was picked up in London and brought to Bristol, where Leake introduced him to heroin. The boy told the police, "It took about a couple of weeks before I needed heroin every day, and I started stealing to fund the habit."
I'd like to praise the victims for the courage that they've shown in actually coming forward and giving accounts of what has occurred to them in this house and at the hands of these men. It was very courageous of them. What I do hope now is that they can put this behind them and try to lead some sort of normal life.
3 more men received lighter prison sentences and probation orders, and 2 more will be sentenced in the new year. Steve Brodie, BBC News West, at Bristol Crown Court.
For a total of 30 years.
They plied the youngsters with drugs and sold them on to other sex perverts in the city, leaving behind them a trail of broken lives. The gang had been operating for a decade before police finally caught up with them.
Number 49 Churchill Road in Brislington, Bristol. Not a normal terraced house, but a vice den of drugs, male prostitution and fear. The paedophile gang that operated here is now shattered. 8 members have been sentenced.
What this has done is it's actually shown us that there has been a real problem with male prostitution of adolescent boys in Bristol. We've now put away some very dangerous men who were well involved in the male prostitution scene in Bristol. I think it still continues. I think it will continue around the country, but it's something that we now will focus on, and with the help of the public, will combat it.
On Monday, Stephen Hutchings from Dorset was given a conditional discharge for gross indecency. And Gerald Wilkins from Banwell near Weston-super-Mare, probation for indecent assault. Then today the gang leaders were sent to jail for a string of serious sex and drugs offences. 43-year-old Christopher Leake, who owned the house in Brislington, 13 years. Alan Tanner, 60, from Bristol, for 9 years, but for ill health it would have been more. And a man who can't be named, jail for 8 years. Judge Mark Dyer told them this was a lamentable tale which had left at least one victim, a broken young man. They had wielded power, influence and false kindness and committed very serious criminal offences. This case has disclosed a dark and Dickensian world of child exploitation, of sex, of drugs and of prostitution, of young boys being preyed upon, their lives scarred forever. Some of the men responsible are tonight starting long prison sentences. Simon Whitby, HTV News, Bristol Crown Court.
Well, after the court case, police praised the youngsters who'd been brave enough to speak out in evidence against their abusers. The effects of the trauma they've suffered are likely to remain with them for many years. In this special report, Howard Wheeler talks to one victim and follows the trial that brought the gang to justice.
We're now at Churchill Road, 20:01 hours.
This was the moment when detectives raided the paedophile's den.
Let me go up.
It was here that the paedophile gang subjected dozens of their teenage victims to the most horrendous of assaults. Inside the house, which was owned by Chris Leake, one of the ringleaders, they found a fruit machine and drugs designed to entice youngsters. The victims were left scarred for life.
I ain't got words to describe how I feel. I mean, there's times when I sit down and I feel so alone, and I just got no one to talk to, and they took my life away from me, basically.
These toilets in Anchor Road were typical of the sort of places where the boys were picked up by gang members. Some were as young as 11 years old. Others were targeted at game machine arcades. Soon they had been hooked on drugs and were working as rent boys. One boy who spoke to HTV was targeted up he wandered into this gay pub. He soon found himself virtually a prisoner at the house in Churchill Road in the Brislington area.
I just thought, well, maybe this is what I've got to do. Maybe this is what's expected of me. In the end, it was just fair. You know, I never used to think, well, am I going to make it through till tomorrow, or am I ever going to get out of this alive?
Detectives were first alerted to the abuse when a relative of one of the boys became suspicious after he was given a lot of presents at the house. Campaigners against child abuse say tales of the horrific crimes carried out by these men have an all too familiar ring about them.
Oh, it's not uncommon. Wherever people want to hurt children, they can sometimes and do sometimes get together to exchange information and also to help maintain the secrecy of things. But wherever vulnerable children congregate, people that want to hurt them will congregate. And this is just a manifestation of that.
8 members of the gang have now been sentenced. For the victims, however, the punishment is not severe enough. Their young lives have been damaged, perhaps permanently.
After what they did to me and all those other people involved, I didn't feel that what they're getting is enough. People like that don't stop at one person just because they served a sentence. They're greedy, they want more and more and more. And one day it's gonna go to a stage where someone's actually gonna wind up dead.
A victim of the paedophile gang jailed for a total of 30 years. That special report by Howard Wheeler. Jane.